Hello and welcome to the Mama and a Manse podcast. I'm Christy and I am so glad that you are taking time to spend with me today. I completely lost my train of thought. You can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Mama and a Manse, and also that is my email on Gmail. There is a thread on the Ravelry group for asking questions, and today I will be answering some that have been in there for a couple of weeks, but they were my first ones that I had gotten, and so I kind of forgot to answer them the last couple podcasts. I have very few finished objects and a couple of works in progress that I've worked on in the last week that I'll be sharing with you. No yarn porn this week. That's about it. So let's get started. The things that I did finish were blanket squares, and there's a few strings left. This one's actually the middle string, which I don't do until after I have blocked. This is the Pinwheel Scrap Blanket by Knitting Expat, or Mina Phillip from the Knitting Expat Designs and Podcasts. These are Molly Girl yarns, which I got through the Row 1 Club back in November. These were the Novembers. So these 4 across here are not, but I'm going to try to go around and tell you what everything is. So, this one right here would be one row at a time, which was an exclusive colorway that she made for the Row 1 Club. Dancing Queen, a certain shade of green. There, you can see that one a little bit better. Those fluorescents kind of were hiding. And then this one right here, sorry, let me move that, is Lollipop. Oh dear. Okay, so then okay, so then the next one goes One of the Boys, Party at a Rich Dude's House, Walk This Way, With or Without You, Imagine. This one over here is Cold as Ice, Some Nights, and then Birdhouse in Your Soul. That was my last one. So, okay, so then we have Wherever Is Your Heart, Trucker Hat. This one I'm going to show closer up so that you can actually see the colors. This is Shut Up and Dance, Monster Mash, Love and Memories, Georgia, Jersey Girl, and Barbie Girl. That pinwheel looks incredibly bright in this block, but I have been doing it. I decided a couple of times ago that I was just going to do the Row 1 yarns. You usually get 10 or 20. I was just going to do them right in order. Some of them kind of make a rainbow. This one, you can kind of tell, makes a little bit of a, not really gradient, but the colors are kind of grouped together. You know, you had all these pinks going into all of these pinks, etc. So that's just how I've been doing them, and so this one very bright fire color ends up, you know, with some other cooler colors, but that's okay. I don't mind that at all. So I'm happy with them. This yarn was good to work with. I would say that the Molly Girl baseline is a 75-25, 460 per 100 grams. I would definitely say that this is a tough sock yarn. Most of the time with all of these pinwheel scrap blankets and even like my socks and stuff, I just break my yarn instead of getting out my scissors, mostly because I feel like the least amount of exposure my 3-year-old has to scissors, the least amount of chance he has of finding where I've hid them or being tempted to cut into my knitting, which has happened a few times since I started this podcast. This yarn, however, every time that I would try to do it, I would like forget and try to pull on it. It felt like it was going to cut my fingers. I could never break any of the colorways that I had tried, and usually like across the back of my pinky and stuff, I would feel like I had a paper cut almost. It wasn't like bleeding or anything, but I did definitely need to use scissors with this, and I think that that probably speaks to it being a very tough sock yarn. It's a 75-25, but literally every other fingering weight that I've had, I've been able to break. I don't think I tried with the row 1 yarns I had that were BFL. I don't know if that matters, but this one seems very sturdy and very tough. And those are my only finished objects. So that means for week 1 of Stash Dash, which is something that I talked about last week and a little bit the week before, is a kind of a contest against yourself that is sponsored by the Knit Girls. Girls is spelled with 3 L's. It's an annual thing through the summer, knitting as much as you want. My goal is 10,000 meters, and these 3 because each block is a completed item, it counts as finished. That gives me a total of week 1, 316 meters. So not a lot of finished meterage this week. It is some, I finished all 3 of those, but I have done a lot of knitting on bigger projects that are not finished, and so that's a lot of why I didn't have a lot of finished objects. And also we've been busy this week. I had an all-day meeting, we've had other meetings, we've been going to the pool, the regular mom stuff. So I haven't had a lot of time for knitting. So anyways, let's move on to what I've been working on. So I did do quite a bit of work on my fading point. It is living in my Mrs. Brown's Bags tote. I think this is the Pretty Young Thing colorway. It is called PYT, which is the abbreviation for the Presbyterian Youth Triennium, which I'm the registrar for our presbytery. And so the PYT I liked anyways, just because it has like double meaning for me. Anyways, and plus it's neon and it's cute and it's perfect. So the fading point, if you live under a rock and have not seen this, is by Joji Locatelli. It's this enormous wrap that you get 5 skeins, and it fades from one end to the other, and then you also have these middle triangles. I've shown the other half before when I fixed it, or when I knit it, but this one, the last time I showed you, sorry, I have like yarns go everywhere. Whoopsie, my notes fell off my knee and almost dumped over my pot. And that would be a tragedy. Okay, so the last time that I showed you, I was down here, I think halfway through this, the lace right here in the first color. I have since gotten up to the, I don't know what you call it. I went through 2, 3, and 4. I'm working on the solid block of 4 that will then do this lace in this color, and then I'll fade into 5. So I'm actually, like, I made quite a bit of progress on this week. And then the side triangles aren't going to be as big, which I wasn't really, like, sure about. Let me see here. So when I finished the color 1 on this one, I was getting incredibly nervous because this is what I have left. And I thought that all of the colors were in the middle triangles. I was freaking out because I spent a lot of money on the set that I bought. I love this set, it is very beautiful. But I didn't think this was gonna be enough. And I went ahead and looked very closely further in the pattern, and the darkest color is not used in the middle, so I'm safe because this would not go very far at all. There's not hardly anything there. I do have quite a bit more left of the other color. You know, this is 2, so that's substantially fatter than the number 1, wherever I put it, because I've since lost it. But anyways, so I've just been knitting along on this, and I'll hopefully have that center done. The knit along in Hohi's group goes until I think the 12th. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it's going to be done by then, but I've just been kind of prioritizing working on this one, and then I have a few knit alongs that are kind of ending like the next week, and so I'm kind of prioritizing this, and then I will go to those and yada yada. Sorry for that interruption. The baby was down for a nap, and then I heard her making noise over here, and I was very confused. And also my husband came back from his nursing home service that he does on some Sundays. My daughter brought her down, my big daughter, so that's why. Okay, and then I started a new project that I haven't shown you yet. It is living in my On the Lamb bag, which if you haven't watched the On the Lamb podcast, you totally should on YouTube. I won this answering a question. And it is perfect for these socks that I'm making for Isaiah. So I showed this yarn, I believe, was it last week or the week before? It's the Regia Pair Perfect Kids Colors. So it's not really wanting to focus. Whatever. You'll see the socks when they're done. I did have about this same amount finished. I think I was somewhere in this blue or this pink or reddish color, and then decided it looked really small and decided to try it on him, and ended up having to rip it out because it did fit and it fit on his leg well, but I had to make it go over his heel, and I felt like if I had it that tight that it was that hard for him to get on that he would not wear it. And so I ripped it out and added more. I started, the first time that I did it, I did 48 stitches, and this time I did 54. Because I am doing a 2x1 rib, so I wanted to go up 3, but I wasn't sure that 3 was going to be enough. He is a very skinny 8-year-old. His legs, he has chicken legs, but they just would not go over his heel. So I'm kind of enjoying how this is just making its own little pattern. The other thing that I was going to talk about, oh crap, I don't know where the tube is. Anyways, I am knitting these with Flexi Flips. So you've probably heard tons of people talking about these. They are the Addis that have a tiny bit of cord in the middle, and they come in a set of 3. So they're, you know, it's not like a 9-inch circular because there's not as much cord. It's not like DPNs because they are flexible, but you only work with 3 of them. I have heard a lot of people talk about these, and something that nobody seems to have mentioned that I discovered this week when I was getting ready to cast on is that while most people use size 1s to knit socks, and by most people, I mean a lot of the podcasters say they use size 1s, I looked for at my yarn store a size 1, and she was out of them, and so I asked her to please make sure that next time that she ordered more of the Flexi Flips to get me a size 1. I went there, got them, all that jazz. Getting ready to cast on, I looked at the tag on my tube again, and of course it does say US 1, but it also says it's a 1.5 millimeter, or 2.5 millimeter, whatever, you know what I mean. So, of the other US ones that I've ever used are 2.25s. This is a 2.5, which is 1.5 US in like every other needle that I've ever touched. I called my yarn store lady and said, are there different size ones? What's the deal? She wasn't even aware. Like, she hadn't noticed that discrepancy either. So I feel like a lot of people have said that they are knitting on the size 1s and they don't like them. And I'm wondering if they're realizing these are bigger than size 1s. They are not size 1s, they are 1.5s. But anyway, so I kind of was like freaking out a little bit because it took me a long time last summer to knit enough socks to get the right gauge that I enjoyed the fabric. And so I was like, well, I'll just try to knit tight with these. And that's why I thought 48 would be big enough too, is because my stitches were going to be bigger. But yes, these are bigger. They are not 2.25 millimeters. Which kind of sent me into a whole rant about why in the world do we not use the metric system for everything? It makes so much more sense. You wouldn't have this business of having to have 1.5s and 2.5 US's because you already made numbers and they don't match up with the sizes in between, yada yada yada. It is so much easier to measure everything with millimeters and all have the same thing. Whatevs. Anyways, that's my rant on the metric system, or not the metric system, whatever system it is that we do. However, when I was picking these up, my yarn store lady, I was like, you know, I'm wondering if I'll like it because I haven't really heard a lot of people say that they super love them. They're kind of expensive. They're like $24, I think, for the set. And I've heard a lot of people say that they don't like them and then get rid of them. And she shared that her theory was that if people liked Magic Loop, that they would like them, and if they liked DPNs, they would not. I don't particularly like DPNs. I avoid them. I do not use them for socks. I Magic Loop, usually do them 2 at a time. But I did decide to use them for this because the smaller amount of stitches, which I thought I was going to have on one sock, because the Pair Perfect you knit until yada yada yada, you knit until the heel and both socks are in one ball, and I didn't want to have to redo it. And so I was only going to be doing one. There were going to be less stitches. I did not want to be pulling my cable through, which I don't find to be a chore when I'm doing 2 at a time with 56 or 60 stitches. But if it was 48 and it was one sock, that, you know, every 24 stitches I'd be doing that, and it would probably be more moving than, or close to the same amount of knitting, maybe a third of the time of knitting, I don't know. And so I decided to use these. I don't like DPNs. I've never been able to figure out. I do use them. It's not like I'm like, oh my goodness, what can I do? I don't Magic Loop the top of hats. I use Magic Loop for socks. For sleeves on sweaters, I get 12-inch circulars. Little tiny baby hats, I do the same thing. But I don't do DPNs if I don't have to. I use DPNs as straight needles to do my pinwheel scrap blanket, but that's about it. I do like these. They're a little bit more, because I'm probably not completely used to them, I do have to kind of like adjust my hands more than with Magic Loop, but I do like that they bend, and I tend to knit kind of like this, with this one in between, and then just going into that one. So it is you know, it can curve and bend, and I'm able to manipulate it. Sometimes it was easier for me to bend it down. And I think that's why I don't like DPNs, is because they're just stuck there and you have to figure out how to put your hands around them. And so this I do like because I can move the needle and adjust it a little bit so that it feels better on my hands. I will not knit myself socks with these Flexi Flips, but little kid socks, I think they're perfect for, because I don't really want to do the magic loop for them. And it's about the right amount of stitches too to kind of fit up on my needle. So I feel good about that. For a little kid sock, which truthfully I was knitting myself 56 stitch socks, so this is only like 2 stitches smaller, but anyways, I am enjoying them. I do like them. I did think that a public service announcement was warranted, because I have seen probably 10 podcasters talk about that Flexi Flips, and not a single one of them has mentioned that the size 1 is not a size 1, that it's a different millimeter. Anyways, so perhaps look at that if you're thinking about getting some or using them. Okay, drink break. Okay, as I mentioned before, I don't have any yarn porn this week, which is kind of strange, but also good because I have a lot. I did get some questions a couple of weeks ago, and so I am going to answer those today. Yeah, I think I'll just jump right into that. So Lorraine from Elliness Crafts podcast asked me 3 questions. So the first one is, how did you get into knitting and who taught you? Well, there's a short answer to this, and there's a slightly longer, more honest answer to this. And I decided that I'm going to go with the longer, more honest answer, because I didn't have that much knitting to show you today, and also because you're my friends and hopefully you accept me for who I am. So I'm just gonna go with it. And this is gonna seem totally unrelated until I get to the point, but before Emma I had 4 miscarriages. When I was pregnant with her, we were not even sure that she would become a baby, and it was the first time that I had tried the progesterone. Back then it was suppositories, which is a whole nother disgusting and tragic story. But after her, we tried, obviously she was a successful pregnancy and became a baby. After her, we tried for 13 months to have Isaiah. That included 3 rounds of Clomid, and we did not have fertility insurance. So to go on past the Clomid, we would have to do all of the more invasive testing, and none of it would be covered, and all of that. And so basically we were doing these 3 rounds, and you know, after the 3rd round we were going to be done, and we couldn't do it anymore. And it was kind of a, if this month doesn't work, then who knows if we're going to have any more children. So that's kind of the background story to kind of say that we very, very much wanted a baby, tried very hard for a baby. From the second that I found out that I was pregnant on that 3rd month of Clomid, we started calling her Elizabeth Ann. And I never thought that I would be the mom of a boy. And so naturally, this baby was obviously a girl. And so we called her by name, and she was a girl, and I was thinking about how to decorate the nursery with the little like matching sisters. I don't know what they're called, but the sisters with the bonnets that you don't see their faces. They're just like really cute. Anyways, that's what I wanted to do the nursery in. And all the matching dresses that I could put her in with Emma, yada, yada, yada. So when we went to the ultrasound when I was 5 months pregnant, we had not picked out a boy name because of course we didn't need to, and it already had a name. It was Elizabeth. Let's just say that we were very shocked to find out that it was Isaiah instead of Elizabeth. And I did not take it well. A lot of people made very rude comments to me about that I should be happy, blah, blah, blah. And while obviously I very, very much wanted the baby, I was more upset that the baby that I had been imagining was kind of gone. And it wasn't that I didn't want him. I did have many fears about how could I possibly raise a boy. But that little girl that I had been imagining, all of those dreams, had kind of ended when we found out that it was a boy. And so I really kind of was mourning for that little girl. And I'm hoping that you guys aren't going to judge me like super harshly for this because I'm trying to just be honest. And so that afternoon I was really upset. You know, I just took some time to adjust, but the next day I'm like, okay, we've got to do stuff because it's a boy. Like, he doesn't have a name. We can't just call it anymore. We know it's a boy. It needs a name. So he was named the next day over Facebook Messenger with my husband. And I think I ordered crib stuff for him the next day. We decided to go with horses instead of the little, like, old-timey dolls that I had been thinking of. But I still kind of had some guilt about being upset about him being a boy. And so I wanted to do something that I had to put time and effort and love into. And so that's when I decided that I wanted to learn to knit. So I was probably about 6 months pregnant by the time I learned. So that's how all that tied in. Anyways, so I did not know anyone who knit. I went to Michael's and got a kit that had this book in it. I taught myself knitting. It came with a couple of sets of knitting needles, like a row gauge, a needle gauge, maybe some stitch markers, stitch holder, basically whatever you needed to get started, and taught myself to knit. I did not know that YouTube existed. I don't know if there were knitting YouTube videos back then. I'm not sure, like, when Very Pink like started all of her videos. I know that she was like one of the first people to have that kind of stuff, but I was not aware of it. So basically I took this book and taught myself the stitches. And I just want to share with you like how bad these awesome patterns are. I think this one might be my favorite. The next page. This lady. Yeah. So I did not make anything from the patterns in this, but I did use it for, like, there's lots of diagrams in it, and that's how I taught myself. I would say that, you know, I think one of the very first things that I did make was a hat for Isaiah, and he wore it when he was born. It did have a hole where I had like made a accidental yarn over in it. It was not the prettiest thing in the world, but I made it with my hands and my love, and so that's why it was special. Anyways, and to go further into that, yes, I did teach myself to knit with this stuff, with this book, but I would say also that I did not become a, oh, that looks terrible. I piled, so there's a vent over here, and then we have like an old house, so it has like the big, like slanty vents, and when I would podcast here in the winter, it was super hot. Well, now the air is blowing on me, so I piled all the junk I could find in front of it so that the air conditioner would not be blowing on me during my podcast. But now you get to see my trashy background. Anyways, so I was saying that I would not say that I became a capital K knitter probably until March of last year. Obviously, Isaiah's 8 years old now, so it's been going on like 8 3/4 of a year that I've been knitting. I think it was probably October-ish or November-ish when I learned to knit. And it was maybe 4 years later that I went into my first fancy yarn store, as I used to refer to them, and I started improving from then and finding patterns, and actually bought a few patterns. But when my knitting really changed, and I've been reflecting on this quite a bit recently, is when I started listening to podcasts. And the Prairie Girls, Danny and Susie, were two of my first ones. They are from Nebraska, and so that immediately like hooked me in, and their friendship is just fantastic. And then the other one that I listened to from the very beginning was the Knit More Girls. And so listening to them, I would listen to them while I knit, or I remember blocking my Easter scarf on my table and like listening to them talk, and I would just put notes into my phone really quickly as I was listening to them, and then I would go and look the things that they were knitting and talking about, yarns. I would look them up once I was done with what I was doing. And that is when I learned to be brave with my knitting and not to be afraid to try new things, to challenge myself, and to go above and beyond the things that I was doing, to make things that I am super proud of, that are really interesting to me, that I love, that are part of my wardrobe, and I'm not going to be like, oh, I don't like that anymore in 3 months. Before I was... It's not that I was ever making crappy stuff on purpose, but I use nicer yarns, and that matters to me. Being mindful of what I'm using while I'm knitting it, or crocheting it, I do a little bit of that too, has really changed that. And seeing that other people, other relatively normal people like Jasmine and Gigi and Danny and Susie, I kind of feel like all of them would think it was weird if I called them normal, but that's totally not the point. Seeing what they were making really inspired me to up my game. And so I'm pretty sure it was like March of last year when I discovered their podcast and started listening to them. And it was either right before Violet was born or right after that I discovered like YouTube podcasts. I did not even know that they existed until almost exactly a year ago. Give or take 2 weeks. I mean, it's literally been a year. They completely changed so much about me. I don't really have local friends that knit. I never have. And so being able to share that with podcasters kind of makes me feel like I have this whole group of friends who, and this is not at all meant to be ageist, but who are not 80 years old and who are kind of in the same life stages as me and interested in making some of the same things, and basically not the grandma craft that knitting is made out to be. My whole life has changed. Podcasting has been very important to me. And then of course I finally decided to do my own too, just because I wanted to share what I'm making. I'm so proud of the things that I make, and it's fun. It's so much fun to get to know people. And anyways, so that was a lot for that first question. Her next question is, do any of your children knit? So my oldest child, also known as my husband, has been knitting a little bit. He's still working on his Batman hat, and now he's sighing in the background. He has his own little fan club when he's on the podcast that just thinks he's so hilarious, which of course he loves because he thinks he is hilarious. He hasn't been knitting a lot lately. We haven't had a lot of time. So even when I've like been trying to sneak time to knit, he's more likely to be changing a diaper at that time or writing a sermon. Neither one of us have very much time, and so he hasn't been knitting that much. My actual children, Emma is still knitting. Her hat is still coming along pretty slowly. There is a reading program at our library that they get stickers for every 15 minutes. She's been reading like crazy since she got out of school. And so she's not, but she did get yarn for her first shawl, which she will do after she finishes her hat. So we started out with a bulky weight hat that was just knit. Then we did a worsted weight hat, which is has some purl stitches in it too. And then we are going to go down to a fingering weight shawl that just has some easy knit two togethers and yarn overs. She has done the knit two togethers obviously in the top of the hats. So she is moving along. Isaiah started a hat and showed it in one of the podcasts, but hasn't really touched it since then. I tried to get him to knit on a washcloth with me to see if maybe that would spark his interest a little bit more, just because it would be a smaller amount. He did maybe like a line and a half and was no longer interested. I think part of his thing is he would rather be playing video games. He's very into video games right now. So I don't know if his age kind of has something to do with that, but he's also very easily frustrated. He does not like to do things that he doesn't know how to do, and gets pretty upset about something that he doesn't have the skill to tackle right away. And the 6-year-old Lizzie also shared her hat back when Isaiah did as well. And she hadn't touched it until this week. She actually did about a round. Her age, she was wanting to knit more, but she kept asking me at times that I couldn't really sit and help her, or I was really trying to do something of my own. And so she hasn't really made much progress. There is more interest, I think, from her than from Isaiah, but I think as she ages, that might help. She did pick it up and try to knit on it herself, but she had like flipped it wrong side out and knit back in the direction she had just came from. Took me a little while to figure out what she had done, but I was bound and determined to fix it and not to rip it out, because I didn't want to like make her feel like she, even though she hasn't done a ton of work, she worked hard, and I didn't want her to feel like I was just taking all of that work away. But I did get it figured out. So she has had a little bit more interest than Isaiah recently, but she is not knitting like on a daily basis or anything. I don't know why my voice is so like yucky today. Okay, the last question was, what is your favorite thing to knit and why? And that was a very hard question. I had to think about it quite a bit, and I couldn't figure it out for myself. So I asked my husband, I'm like, what do you think my favorite thing to knit is? And he's like, oh, I don't know. And so he tried to think about it, and I'm like, and then I told him, you know, I can't figure out what my favorite thing to knit is, but I know what my 3 favorite things to knit is. And he named them off right away. So we're gonna go with that. I have 3 favorite things to knit. And they are all my favorites for a different reason. And so here they are. Socks are one of my favorite things to knit. I like being able to explore, you know, I don't know how well you can see colors, but there's like fluorescent pink, something that I'm probably not going to wear right up next to my pink tinged face. Anything crazy, you know, all these different vibrant colors maybe is something that I would not really feel comfortable wearing a sweater in, but sorry, there's a cat making noise. I had to make sure they weren't eating anything important. I feel like socks, first of all, when you're done with them, you're pretty much done. Like, you have to put in like 2 or 3 ends. Okay, sorry, my battery thing came up and I just wanted to make sure it was still recording. You have 2 or 3 ends to weave in and then you're done. So it's kind of an instant gratification when it's done. Also because I do 2 at a time and not like one after another. But I can explore colors and I don't have to feel limited because a sock can be any crazy thing you want it to be. And it's really fun to show them off. That's why I like socks. My other favorite thing to knit would probably be sweaters. I really like them because they are very versatile. I feel like that's something that I can wear so much. And just the coziness. And there's a huge feeling of accomplishment for me when I knit a sweater. I think we're going to have company in a second. I don't like Sleeve Island, so maybe out of the 3, sweaters are maybe my least favorite, but when they're finished, I really love them. Don't crawl under the tripod. Come over here if you want to come over here. No, Violet! Sorry. Come over here. And then my other favorite would be shawls. And shawls is... Violet! It's not funny. Not funny. Alright, I gotta hide my... Ah! Okay, that was fun. Sorry for that little ride you just went on. Ugh. Do you want to look? Okay, stop moving it. You're making people vomit. And see, you moved it too far and now you can see all the junk that's covering the air conditioning vent. Oh my goodness. And my phone's gonna die. Okay, so shawls. Oh my god. Shawls would be would maybe be my favorite of the 3. I feel like they are something where you can really show off. I really like something that has more than one color in it. And you can put these colors together. The fades have really taken off. You can have lace in it without it being like a ridiculous sweater that you can't wear or anything like that. You can kind of show off your skills and it's still a manageable project. There's not a ton of like, is it gonna fit around my armpits? Is it going to gap at my boobs? There's none of that business. And I feel like I can wear them a lot too. So those are my 3 favorites: socks, shawls, and sweaters. Probably if I had to put them in order, it'd be shawls, socks, sweaters. Scarves would be my absolute least favorite. Dishcloths would be my 2nd least favorite. What are you looking at? Yeah. So that is the end of the questions that we had. If you have any questions that you would like to know about, hop on over to the Ravelry group and ask them in the What Do You Want to Know About thread. I think that I've covered most of the life in a Manse stuff throughout the podcast, and I was going to try to podcast last Friday, and obviously that did not work out. Being able to find time to sit still for that long and also like give up the time that I could be knitting is difficult. But it's been exactly a week since I podcasted last time, and truthfully, church I obviously have to like wear a bra and put on makeup that day, so it kind of works well to podcast after church if naps are taken. I don't know what's going on, why the baby's still up, but I'm going to get off here and find out and then upload this. Let me know if you are participating in Stash Dash, if you have any questions, anything. But thank you for spending time with me today, and I'll see you next week.